So for today, I just want to jump right back into where we have been the past 2 weeks. Our series, Easy to See. Really, the heart behind this series comes from a verse in the New Testament from 1 John chapter 3, verse 18, which says this: "Dear children, let's not merely say that we love each other, let us show the truth by our actions." See, while our words matter, they certainly have power. We don't just want to be a people who only talk about loving others. We want to be a people who show our love for one another. I mean, that's what the church should be about. That's what you and I as individuals should be about. Not just talking about loving people, but putting actions behind those words. I mean, I want my life to make a difference. I'm sure you do too. I want my life to make an impact. And we all dream of that. We're all hardwired that way. And if you think back about the people in your life that you've run across who have impacted your life in some way, it's because they actually put actions behind those words. It's because they demonstrated their love for you. And for those of us who are Christians, when you and I gave our lives to Christ, we signed up for more than just saying we love each other. Our love for one another, as demonstrated by Christ, as defined by Jesus, as shown to us by Jesus, should be noticeable and distinct. And it's through our actions that we will make a difference. It is through our actions that we will make an impact. So for the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about how we can make our love noticeable and distinct through how we give to one another, serve one another. Last week we talked about our compassion for one another, both on a collective level and an individual level. And so this week, I just want to talk to you about one more way that we can make our love easy to see and prove that we are more than just talk. In fact, I would say that this is probably one of the most powerful and undeniable ways to demonstrate our love for one another. If we want to love others well, if we want to make our love easy to see, one thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to learn how to forgive. When we choose to forgive, you know what we're choosing? We are choosing a love that is louder than words. Forgiveness for us is essential. I would go so far as to say it's critical. I mean, we can't afford to be unforgiving people because forgiveness is necessary for connecting with others. I mean, without it, we will never sustain a human relationship. And you and I, we were created by God. We were designed by God to be in connection with one another. I mean, our relationship with God begins by us experiencing his forgiveness. And learning how to forgive, you know what that's going to end up doing? That's going to end up making you a better person. And we all want to be better people. I mean, maybe you don't care, but let me ask you this. Do you want a marriage built on trust and intimacy? Do you want relationships that are deep and meaningful? Do you want to reconcile relationships and heal brokenness and repair division? If you answered yes to any of those questions, you will never be able to do that without forgiveness and without learning how to ask for forgiveness. I mean, there isn't a marriage in history that has made it without forgiveness being part of that marriage. If you've had a friendship with someone that's lasted longer than a year, chances are real high that forgiveness has been a part of that friendship. Parents, let me just talk to you for a second. Your kids will need your forgiveness, and you, make no mistake, you will need their forgiveness too. I certainly do. I mean, I had a major mom fail just a couple weeks ago. While I was preparing for a talk on forgiveness, I had a major mom fail. And maybe some of the moms out there can relate to this story that I'm about to tell you, but it was after dinner one night. I was really tired, and I'm certainly not trying to justify this, but I happened to have the flu. I wanted to be in bed. One of my children, my 11-year-old son, was not doing a very good job of listening to what I was asking him to do. And so the poor kid ended up getting caught in the crosshairs of my frustration. And I ended up saying something, losing my cool and saying something to him that I shouldn't have said. In fact, it was something that Jonathan and I have repeatedly told all 3 of our kids they are not allowed to say. And I said it. Twice. Like, put an exclamation point on it. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I instantly regretted it. I knew I shouldn't have said it. But I spent the next 45 minutes wrestling in my mind with whether or not I needed to ask Asher for forgiveness or not, because my pride, you know what it was doing? It was whispering in my ear. It was going, he should have been listening to you. He should have been doing what you were telling him to do. I mean, you're the parent. He's got to learn. But ultimately, there was no way around it. I was going to have to go and ask Asher for forgiveness. I did, and gratefully, he forgave me. And I'd like to say that as a parent, I'm not going to fail again, but that's not going to be the case. And so I'm not telling you this because I am giving myself a pat on the back for doing the right thing. I'm telling you this because I have learned through watching people, like I'm sure you have, some of you have too, that one of the most powerful ways that we can make our love easy to see for our kids is by modeling what it looks like to forgive our kids when they need it, and by modeling what it looks like to ask them for forgiveness when we need it. And we can't go through this life without forgiveness. Whether you are a Christian, whether you believe in God or not, you will need forgiveness. Whether you choose to forgive or not, we will all need forgiveness. And chances are high we will all need it again at some point. We will need forgiveness. And I want to be around people who are a forgiving people, because I'm going to need it. And I am sure you want to be around people who are a forgiving people because you're going to need it. And you want to be around people who admit when they make mistakes and ask for forgiveness. It's what we all do. But if you haven't noticed, forgiveness is running in real short supply these days. I mean, cancel culture is the order of the day. And cancel culture, well, that phrase, those two words, that's relatively new. I mean, I guess it's been around the last, 5 to 7 years or so. Cancel culture is really nothing new. It's just unforgiveness. And the world has never defaulted to forgiveness. That's why forgiveness is such a powerful way of showing love, because it's not something we see every day. It's not something that comes naturally to us. And if you were a Christian, Jesus made it clear that choosing not to forgive should not be an option for you. And I get it when I say this, that some of you bristle at this. You're tensing up when we're talking about forgiveness, because for you, forgiveness is a really sensitive subject. I mean, some of you have been so hurt. You carry so much pain. You carry such a burden because you have been so broken over some things that have been done to you. And while you can get on board with forgiveness, for you, there has to be a limit. There has to be a line. And once that line is crossed, there has to be a yeah, but. Yeah, but what about this kind of situation? Yeah, but you don't know how bad she hurt the kids and me when she walked out on my marriage. Yeah, but you don't know how my dad would act when he would drink. Yeah, but you don't know how many times she lied and the trauma that I am living with now as a result of her actions. Yeah, but you don't know what I did, and I just can't forgive myself. You see, canceling is easy. That's why the world does it. Forgiveness is hard. That's why it's the exception. And depending on the type of offense or the level of hurt caused, choosing to forgive may just end up being one of the most difficult decisions you will ever make. I mean, we would rather hold on to our hurt and our anger and our resentment and bitterness than forgive someone. And the truth is, while most people don't say this, I'm going to say this to you right now because I want to tell you the truth. The truth is that we actually like holding on to those things. You know why? Because it makes us feel strong. It makes us feel guarded and protected, like no one's going to hurt us anymore. If we choose not to forgive, we're guarded. It makes us feel like we're in control, and we control people through guilt and shame. But here's the problem with that. Bitterness and unforgiveness only feigns strength. It's really just weakness in disguise. And when you refuse to forgive, it's like pushing a self-destruct button in your own life. I mean, you think it gives you strength, but it's really just you shifting into self-destruct mode. And several years ago, I heard a message by Pastor Andy Stanley on forgiveness, and I like the way that he phrased this when he was talking about forgiveness. He actually said this: refusing to forgive is to chain yourself to that hurt and drag it into relationship after relationship. I mean, you can choose to forgive, but if you do, it will only end up polarizing and separating. It will prolong your anger. It will prolong your hate. It will consume you with bitterness. It will consume you with anger. And you will ultimately end up self-destructing. And that's one of the reasons Jesus, and if you were to follow Jesus through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the Bible, every time Jesus talked about forgiveness, he actually elevated forgiveness to this vitally important level. Because when you are an unforgiving person to one person, that lack of forgiveness will inevitably affect every single relationship that you have, including your relationship with God. It's inevitable. And Jesus knew there would be a lot of objections to forgiveness, but he also understood how critical it was for you and I to be forgiving. It's for our own good. It's so crucial, he even prayed for our forgiveness. In one of his most famous prayers called the Lord's Prayer, and even if you haven't been around church much in the past, you've likely heard of the Lord's Prayer or read it somewhere. But in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, Jesus prays for our forgiveness. And I want you to see what he said. Here's what he said. He says, "May your kingdom come soon. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today the food we need, and forgive us our sins as we have forgiven those who sin against us." You see, the part that we often read right over when we read the Lord's Prayer is the "as we have forgiven" part. I mean, think about that for a second. In the middle of this prayer, Jesus reminds us of the conditions of forgiveness. And when he finished praying, just in case his disciples had any questions about those conditions, he actually clarifies what he meant by the "as we have forgiven" part. He goes on to say this: if you forgive those who sin against you, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you refuse to forgive others, your Father will not forgive your sins. Does this make anybody else uncomfortable? Because it makes me uncomfortable. I mean, in other words, the level at which you forgive others is the level at which Jesus is praying and asking God to forgive you. See, Jesus is saying, if you don't forgive, it will ruin your relational intimacy with God. And here's the thing, I said it all earlier. We all need forgiveness. None of us can go through this life without it. And God's forgiveness for us is available to all people. It is limitless, but he will choose not to forgive you if you choose not to forgive others. We must choose forgiveness. And I think this potentially made Jesus' own disciples a bit uncomfortable. I mean, they had a hard time wrapping their minds around this, I'm sure, because of the culture that they lived in. So later in Matthew's gospel, you can actually read about Peter approaching Jesus, and he brings up the subject of forgiveness again. Look at what Peter said to Jesus this time. It says, "Then Peter came to him, Jesus, and asked, 'Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times?'" You see, this is Peter saying, yeah, but there has to be a limit to forgiveness. I mean, once that line is crossed, forgiveness is off the table, right, Jesus? I mean, even first century Jewish traditions taught that there was a limit to forgiveness, and the limit was 3 times. 3 strikes, you're out. And Peter, in typical Peter fashion, goes to Jesus and probably in an attempt to make himself look good, doubles that number 3 times. No, let's say 6 times. Let's throw 1 in for good measure. 7 times. All right, Jesus, how often should I forgive? 7 times? Does that sound good? And Jesus' reply to that, look at this. No, not 7 times. Wrong, Peter. But 70 times 7. And I can guarantee when Peter heard that, he must have thought, okay, Jesus is out of his mind. I mean, first, you're praying and you ask God to forgive us based on how we forgive others as we have forgiven, and now you're telling us 70 times 7? I mean, come on, Jesus. But Jesus didn't let up on forgiveness. He continued to elevate the vital importance of forgiveness. In Luke's gospel, Jesus even talks about it like this. Look at what he said. He said, even if that person wrongs you 7 times a day, and each time turns again and asks forgiveness. I want to say, I'm out. If this is happening in the same day, I'm out after 2 or 3 times. I mean, I might have enough grace in the same day for 2, maybe 3 times, but 7 times? I mean, come on, Jesus. And especially depending on what they did. But notice Jesus didn't say a word about the kind of offense that was caused. He just said, even if that person wrongs you 7 times a day and each time turns again and asks forgiveness, look at how he finishes this. He said, you should forgive? That's actually not what he said. He said, you might want to think about forgiving. That's not what he said either. He says, I hope you forgive. That's not what he said. This is how Jesus finished it. He said, you must forgive. You must forgive. And the higher the stakes, the greater the offense, the more pain and hurt that has been caused, the more impossible this is going to feel. And if I could just be real vulnerable with you for a second, I don't always feel like I have the ability to do this. Like even if I dug real deep, I don't feel like it's there. Especially depending on what kind of pain was caused. And those listening to Jesus in that moment, you know what? I think that they felt the same way because of how they responded to this. Look at what they said to Jesus in response. The apostles said to the Lord, show us how to increase our faith. Because they knew to forgive the way that Jesus is telling us that we must forgive, it's going to require faith. It's going to require that we trust God for the outcome, whatever that might be. We won't be able to forgive like that apart from our faith in Jesus. And here's what Jesus was saying with the 70 times 7 and the 7 times a day. Even though you may feel like the pain and the hurt is more than you can bear, you have within you the power to forgive one more time. And after that, one more time. And after that, one more time. See, Jesus knew what unforgiveness would do to our hearts. He knew that if we choose to live in unforgiveness, what will end up happening is we will lock down our capacity to live in the freedom that Jesus died to bring us. When we refuse to forgive, all we will end up doing is chaining ourselves to that hurt and that pain. I mean, look at what unforgiveness is doing to the world. It's tearing us apart. Unforgiveness doesn't just shape the people it's directed towards, it shapes you. It's like a disease that eats away at our soul. And if left to its own devices, we will eventually self-destruct. And that's why Jesus said, if you are my followers, this is not an option for you. You must forgive, because the world, that's not going to be something that the world ever defaults to. But you, especially my followers, you must be a conduit of forgiveness. It's for your good. It's a mistake to think that forgiveness is more for the person that caused the pain. No. Forgiveness is more for you than the one who did you the harm. And let me just say this. If you were in a situation where there is abuse or violence, forgiveness can be done at a distance. If you or someone you care about is in danger of being hurt or injured, your first priority is to remove yourself from that situation. I mean, we don't forgive because someone deserves our forgiveness or because they're justified or because you agree with them, but rather because you have the power to forgive. And that power of forgiveness will bring you freedom. It will bring you healing. it will make you a better person. It will make your love for one another easy to see. And one of the greatest examples of the power of forgiveness that I can remember in recent years happened on one of the darkest days. In 2015, 12 members of Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, were shot while attending a Bible study for no other reason than the shooter was intent on starting a race war. They were husbands, fathers, wives, mothers, sons, daughters, loved ones. 9 of those 12 lost their lives. I mean, it's still hard to even put into words what happened on that night. But in the aftermath of that horrific tragedy, family members and loved ones of the victims stood up in court just 2 days later. And much to the shock of everyone watching, myself included, chose to unleash in that courtroom the power of forgiveness. And for you, it might not be that you lost your husband or son or a loved one tragically like this, but if those ladies can forgive in the midst of this horrific tragedy, then there is nothing that we can't forgive. See, letting go doesn't mean that there won't be consequences for the offender. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It's a process. It's a decision, not a feeling. And some of you have been so hurt that you might need to wake up again and again and again and make the decision for as long as it takes to forgive. I mean, if you want freedom and healing, refusing to forgive is not an option for you. You must forgive. And some of you will have the opportunity in the next few weeks to make your love for one another easy to see by being a conduit of forgiveness to your own families. You're going to be walking into situations with family and extended family where there has been a history of hurt and pain and unforgiveness. And it just might be that you're going to have to forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, or someone who doesn't ask for it or even want it, or someone who's not even around anymore. But it may also be that the forgiveness you have been withholding has been suffocating their soul, and one of the greatest gifts you could give them and yourself is forgiveness. And some of the most powerful words that you may ever speak into their lives is the words, I forgive you. I mean, if that's you, and you're already feeling the tension of having to be around your family and extended family over the holidays, and you're just wrestling with unforgiveness, you know what I want to do? I just want to give you a simple prayer that you can say as many times as you need to under your breath, even when you're sitting face to face with the person that you're having a hard time forgiving or even asking for forgiveness. Here's what you can pray. God, give me the grace to forgive and the strength to let go. God, give me the grace to forgive and the strength to let go. The strength to let go of what she did, of what he said, of how they treated us. The grace to forgive and the strength to let go of what I did. I mean, there's some of you who need to let go and forgive yourselves, and sometimes I think this is the hardest one for us. You see, forgiveness in no way will change the past, but it sure will change your future. And God's forgiveness is available for all. No one can go where his forgiveness can't reach. And if God is willing to forgive you, then why in the world are you hesitating to forgive yourself? The moment you come clean before God and say to him, you know what, God, I messed up. I blew it. God is faithful to forgive you. And he will give you the opportunity to start fresh and new. And if you are wrestling with this, you can pray the same prayer with just a simple nuance. God, give me the grace to forgive myself and the strength to let go. You'll still have to live with the consequences of your choices, but those choices no longer have to define you. Let go and forgive yourself, and then go and ask for forgiveness. And even if the person you are asking forgiveness from chooses not to forgive you, you don't get a pass on forgiving yourself. Jesus said you must forgive. And if we want to make our love for one another easy to see, we don't stand a chance if we don't forgive. So right now what's going to happen, the band is going to come and they're going to sing a song. And I just want you, if you need to, just take this opportunity to just start talking to God. I mean, maybe this is a moment where you can pray that prayer, or a moment in which you ask God to even show you where you have been holding on to anger and bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness. Would you pray with me? God, I am so grateful that you understand our pain and our hurt and our brokenness, that you understand the burdens that we carry. God, you know how hard forgiveness can be. You sent your son to die on the cross for us. You offered us forgiveness before we even knew that we needed forgiveness. God, we certainly didn't deserve it. We certainly didn't ask for it. But God, you offered it to us anyway. So I pray that you'll give us the strength to do what you did, to step into forgiveness and forgive those, God, who have sinned against us, who have hurt us, who have caused us pain. God, give us the grace to forgive and the strength to let go. God, thank you for your grace. Amen.
The past is like a glass half empty. It came and then it went, spilling over old regrets. I can't go back and change yesterday, but it holds me like a friend, so I hold it in my hands like a weapon, waiting for the wounds to heal, and hurting just to know I still feel, but I feel ready. Letting go doesn't mean that I'm alright. It doesn't mean that I don't fight the memories or the pain inside of me. Forgiving you doesn't mean that I forget. It just means that I won't let it hold me back any longer. It's time to let this heal and make me stronger. Tomorrow's like an empty promise. No one knows what it will hold, so it's time that truth be told. Today's the only time I'm given, and so I'll open up my hands and I'll give it up to God in heaven, and praying for these wounds to heal, and opening my heart to feel. Oh, I feel ready. Letting go doesn't mean that I'm alright. It doesn't mean that I don't fight the memories or the pain inside of me. Forgiving you doesn't mean that I forget. It just means that I won't let it hold me back any longer. It's time to let this heal and make me stronger. Stronger isn't how I feel right now. Doesn't mean I've figured out how I'll ever be okay. But Letting go doesn't mean that I'm alright. It doesn't mean that I don't fight the memories or the pain inside of me. Forgiving you doesn't mean that I forget. It just means that I won't let it hold me back any longer. It's time to let this heal and make me stronger.
If anyone had the right to refuse to forgive and live in offense, it was Jesus. Yet he still chose to forgive us. He went to the cross knowing all about what all of us would be like, and he did it anyway. See, in the shadow of the cross, all of those, yeah, but you don't know how he acted, or yeah, but you don't know how she treated me, all of those pale in comparison to what Jesus did for us on the cross. See, because of the cross, we have all lost our right to refuse to forgive anyone for anything that they've done. Jesus says, I want you to take the same forgiveness and love that I showed you and show it to others, not because they deserve it, but because you have the power to forgive. Because it will bring you healing and freedom. Because it will change you for the better. Because it will make your love for one another easy to see. You have within you the power to forgive one more time. You must forgive. So if you're here today and you would like prayer for this or for anything else you may be dealing with, we would love to pray with you. We will have people up in the front left of all of our locations after the gathering if you need prayer. And if you're watching online, you can leave us a prayer request on our website at any time, and we will have people who will be praying for you. So LCBC, may the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. We'll see you next week.